The opening scene of the 2012 horror movie Sinister is one of the most chilling and disturbing that I think I've ever seen. The movie opens up with a dark, ominous static sound and footage of a family being hung from a tree in their backyard. Now, outside of the disturbing nature of what is happening to this family, there's a few things that help make this opening so creepy. The footage was recorded on Super 8 film and has been slowed down. The static noise in the background. The lack of clarity on who is actually doing this to the family. These all help to make this opening scene hit as hard as it does, which perfectly sets the tone and atmosphere of the movie. Deeply disturbing, unsettling, and creepy. But the problem is, this creepiness only lasts for half the movie. You see, for a long time I thought that this movie was the scariest that I had ever seen, but after a few rewatches, I think that's pretty far from the case. Now, of course, I can't objectively say that Sinister isn't very scary, because the feeling of fear is completely subjective, but I do want to talk about some things that happen in the latter half of this movie that may make it less scary than you remember. So for context, Sinister is centered around Ellison Oswald, a true crime author that tries to crack unsolved cases from the past. His last book to pop off was like 10 years ago, and he's desperate to make his next big hit. So desperate that this motherfucker decides to move his family into the house where the family from the opening scene was hung. Because for his next book, he wants to figure out who did this to the family and why one of the children of the family is missing. But soon after moving in, he finds films of people being killed in heinous ways and learns of a demonic presence that haunts the house. Now, although I don't find Sinister to be as scary as I once did, I still think the first half of this movie is pretty creepy and unsettling. And I think this can be attributed to two major aspects of the film. The found footage aspect, with murders being recorded on film, and the supernatural piece, with the background presence of a demon. Now, when it comes to the found footage aspect, I think that this is really the main reason why the first half of this movie works so well, and is what I remember when I think about this movie. As I mentioned earlier, Ellison finds a bunch of old film footage after moving his family into a new house. Each film reel starts off as a typical home movie, showing a family having fun, and then suddenly cuts to the family being murdered by an unseen individual. Each film also has an innocent name that corresponds to how the victims were killed. In the film Pool Party, a family is taped to lawn chairs and dragged into a pool until they drown. In Barbecue, a family is tied up inside their own car and burned to death. In Lawn Work, a person is run over with the lawnmower. You get the point. Now, what makes these films so creepy is not only the disturbing nature of the content, but also how they were shot. The films in this movie were shot using a real Super 8 film camera, and were made to look like snuff films, films that record people actually being murdered. When the Super 8 film format was first introduced in the 60s, it made filmmaking a lot cheaper and easier for the average person, which is why it works so well as the format to record the murders. The low-budget filming style combined with the fact that the person filming is completely unknown makes it look more real, which in turn makes it scarier. The grainy effect from the Super 8 film also adds to the creepiness of these scenes. But it's not just the footage alone that's creepy. It's the footage along with one of the most unnerving soundtracks that I've ever heard in a horror movie. The all-synth, sound design based score helps to set the unsettling atmosphere that can be felt in the first half of the movie, with certain tracks that just sound like a collection of strange voices, moans, and whispers. The entire soundtrack is creepy as hell, but I'd have to say the track that creeped me out the most was definitely the song that's played in the Barbecue film. Yeah, fuck that. Outside of the creepy films and music, I also think the background presence of the demon in this movie helps to make the setup of the film so unsettling. Initially, it can only vaguely be seen at the end of some of the films, along with the strange symbol that also appears. I think the demonic presence being in the background of the murder films adds another layer of horror to this movie. This presence increases your curiosity as to what's going on in the film, and curiosity can of course be associated with fear. Because we don't get a clear look at it, we wonder exactly what it is and why it's there, which makes it more scary. Honestly, the first half of Sinister is pretty damn good, and I think it's so good that it almost makes you forget about how subpar the rest of the film is. And before rewatching it, when I thought about it being the scariest movie I had ever seen, I was really only thinking about the first half. I pretty much forgot about the rest of the movie. And I think this drop off in the second half makes the movie as a whole less scary than I remember. A part of what makes the setup of this movie so creepy is that there's a lot that you don't know as a viewer. You don't know why the box of film reels is in the house, or who's killing the families, or what exactly the demonic presence is. The ambiguity of it all makes it scarier. But as the plot of the movie unravels and we get exposition that explains what the demonic presence is, I think the movie fumbles everything that it previously built up. It starts off with this great blend of found footage horror with a small supernatural element, but ends up coming on a little too strong with the supernatural part.
Boy, ain't no fucking way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
I think the movie's downfall starts when we learn more about the demon. So after watching some of the snuff films and doing research, Ellison realizes that in all of the murders, a child of the family went missing. He also notices that the demonic figure is in all of the films, which is when the movie starts making it very clear that this figure is indeed a demon. It's now been photoshopped into the background of the footage with the family being hung, which I think looks a little goofy now. We get closer looks at its face, and the scene where it moves in the computer screen to look at Ellison.
Holy.
And as the movie goes on, we see more and more of the demon front and center. They even start using it for cheap jump scares. My issue with the way the demon is used in the latter half of this movie is that it loses all of the ambiguity that previously made it creepy. It makes the atmosphere of the film more unsettling because you don't know much about it. So when it turns out to be your standard horror movie demon, I think it loses a lot of its horror. We even go on to have the demon fully explained to us when Ellison meets up with an occult expert to ask about the symbol that he sees in some of the films. Essentially, this demon is an obscure pagan deity named Bagul. Sorry. Also known as the Eater of Children. Pretty much he brainwashes kids, takes them away from the physical world, and then slowly eats their souls over time. And later on, we find out that he makes the kids kill their families once they're possessed. And whenever a new family moves into a house where he had another family killed and watches the films, Bagul is able to once again brainwash a kid in the family. So in all of the films, the person behind the camera was a kid from the family, who was thought to have been kidnapped. Now I can see how kids killing their families and recording it can be creepy. Personally, knowing that it's kids doing the murders makes the movie less scary for me, but I get it. My issue is when the kids whose souls have been taken by Bagul start showing up in the movie. Specifically, there's a sequence where Ellison wakes up in the middle of the night because the films and projector that he put in a box and locked in a room have now been fully set up, and the first film is playing on its own. So the movie has gone full on supernatural at this point. Then the ghost kids just appear and start running around in slow motion. And it's just like, really? They kind of just look like kids that are dressed up as ghosts for Halloween. And this just took me out of the movie, because I felt like at this point the creepy atmosphere that was established previously was gone. We went from this to this. And it doesn't help that these ghost kids, or Bagul, pose no immediate threat to Ellison, because Bagul operates by killing families through a kid. And each family that he had killed previously lived at the house of the family that was killed before them.
And when you put them in chronological order, you can actually draw a line from murder to murder to murder.
So until the point where Ellison and his family move and get killed by his daughter Ashley, the one being brainwashed, they can't actually be harmed, just spooked out. Now this is also the case earlier in the movie, but at that point we know nothing about Bagul, so we don't yet know that Ellison actually isn't in immediate danger. In this scene, we can literally see that nothing bad is happening to him, which makes it a lot harder for it to be scary. The movie kind of relies on you thinking that Bagul and the ghost kids look scary, because they can't really do much at this point. So of course if you don't think they look scary, the supernatural stuff isn't going to be that creepy. The next night, Ellison wakes up after being recorded in his sleep, presumably by his daughter who will eventually kill him. He then goes up to the attic after hearing noises coming from there and finds the ghost kid sitting and watching footage of Bagul, who at this point we can see very clearly and kinda just looks like Rockstar Slender Man. I don't know. I feel like getting clearer looks at him makes him less scary. Then we get the jump scare I mentioned earlier, and the projector and all of the films start falling from the attic, which causes Ellison to finally want to leave the house. And at this point, I almost feel like we're watching a different movie, which is why I think this movie isn't as scary as I remembered it being. It kinda just turns into a subpar supernatural movie. just ghosts fucking around with people and cheap jump scares, after having some pretty good jump scares earlier on. Yes, the first half of this movie is really good and very creepy, but once we learn more about Bagul and the ghost kids, I think the film loses all of its momentum. And side note, Ethan Hawke's acting is great in this, and he pretty much carries this movie on his back, but his character is so unlikable. Dude pretty much neglects his family and refuses to admit that he put them in a bad situation, all so he could get clout from a book. Seek help. So the movie ends when the daughter Ashley kills Ellison and the rest of the family and makes a snuff film for someone else to watch in the future so the cycle can continue. And we get one final jump scare to send us off, which is probably the cheapest jump scare in the movie. How did we get here? Sinister is still a creepy movie, but I think the heavy-handed supernatural element in the latter half brings down the scariness of the entire film. I've seen a few people on Reddit suggest completely getting rid of Bagul and the supernatural element and replacing it with an actual serial killer that manipulates kids into killing their families, and I think that would have been pretty cool to see. But as it stands, I think that Sinister is a very solid movie with an amazing build-up that just isn't as scary as I remember it being. Even the disturbing snuff films don't hit the same as they used to, because now I've seen more disturbing movies like Hereditary, Midsommar, and Suspiria. Not to mention I can literally just be casually strolling on Twitter and see something incredibly disturbing at any moment. Like a lot of other people, I've become more desensitized to stuff like this over time, which makes it less disturbing. But what do you think? How scary is Sinister to you? Let me know how well you think this movie holds up down in the comments, and I'll catch you on the next one.